Hello and welcome to The Modern Manager. I am Mamie Canfor-Stewart. I am so glad you joined me today, where we are going to talk about the ever-present challenge of how managers can share decision-making power and authority with their team members. Before I dive in, please hit that subscribe button. I share videos like this every week where I unpack a concept, I share a strategy, some tips or tools, all in service of helping you be an effective manager so that you can build a workplace where everyone gets to be their best selves and do their best work. Now, let's get to it. The leadership continuum model, which I'm going to unpack in a second, was developed first in 1958 by two contingency theorists, Robert Tannenbaum and Warren Schmidt, and they published their research or their theory in Harvard Business Review. And since then, it has been expanded upon. What they originally developed were 7 different leadership styles, and now there are 9 in the version that I use, and other different versions have different amounts and different descriptions. But the point here is to say that there are many different ways that we can share power and authority around decisions, and by having a model like this, it helps you clarify what's the right approach for this situation, and it enables you to then work with your team members to make sure that everyone is clear about who has what power, who has what authority, which will just streamline the decision-making process and make everyone feel appropriately included. Now, imagine a line going from left to right. And on the left-hand side, the manager has full and total decision-making authority and control. And as we move to the right, the manager is giving up a little bit of control as the employee is gaining a little bit of control until we get to the far right-hand side, where the employee has all of the power and authority and control, and the manager has none. Now, let's take a look at each of the stops along the way. Starting on the far left, with the manager having all control, we call that telling. And with telling, the manager has made the decision, not talked to, consulted, gotten input from the employee whatsoever. They have just totally framed the problem, come up with the solutions, made the decision, and is now just communicating that decision as a directive or as a command or kind of just as information sharing that this decision has been made and I'm telling you about it. Now, if we take one step to the right, we get to selling. And here is where the manager has done the exact same things. It has been completely decided upon independently, but the manager wants to get buy-in, that the person who is going to be part of this decision or is going to be impacted by this decision or have to execute on this decision, it's important that they are convinced of the decision. So unlike telling, where it's just a straightforward, here's what's happening, selling involves bringing the person in, helping them understand the decision and why it was made, and making them feel as if this is a good decision and they are bought into it. We then take a step into suggesting. And here, the manager has framed up the problem, come up with some solutions, or has identified the components of the decision and has some recommendations. But they are going to get input from the team member before making a final decision. So the manager is making the suggestion of what the decision will be, and the team member then gets to give some input or ask questions about that decision before it gets finalized. Taking one more step to the right, we now get to consulting. And here is where the manager still is doing most of the heavy lifting up front, but is really consulting with the team member, curious to know what they think, wants to hear some suggestions from them, wants to hear ideas from them. But at the end of the day, the team member is not the one making the decision. It's still the manager, but the team member gets to play a much larger role in shaping the decision and the potential outcomes. Now, as we take another step to the right, we get to framing. And here is the first place where we get to see that the team member really starts to step into their authority. And in this case, the manager is framing up the decision and framing up the options, but then giving control to the team member to run with that and say, okay, here's what's acceptable. Here's where we're at. Now you get to decide, and I'm going to take a step back. I've already given my input, and I'm now letting you take control from here and make the final decision. Now, as we take another step to the right, we get to selecting, in which case the roles are a little bit reversed from what I just shared around framing. Here, the team member has identified the decision, kind of framed it out, thought about the options, and is serving up options to the manager, and the manager is now deciding amongst the options. We then get to agreeing, where the team member and the manager are truly partners in understanding the decision, identifying options, and making that decision together, that they really are working together to come to an agreement that meets both of their needs and has both of their input equally held. As we're getting closer to the end, to the right-hand side of the spectrum, next we have advising. And here, the team members really owning the decision, but they are seeking input from the manager. So they are coming with ideas and thoughts and suggestions, but they want to know what questions does the manager have, what perspective do they have, what do they think, but ultimately the team member is still the one who's going to own and make that final decision. We then get to delegating, where the manager has framed up just the boundaries of the decision, provided any kind of metrics or criteria, and then really given free rein to the team member to make any decision within those boundaries. And then lastly, we have the team member having full control, we call that space abdicating, where the manager has abdicated any role that they're playing, and the team member has full control and capability to make the decision, generate the ideas, do all of that, and not even talk to the manager at all. So as you can see, there are many, many different ways to approach a decision and share authority. And in any given situation, you might choose one or another, and those are both right, or there may be a different option. So I'll share an example from my own experience. A couple of years ago, one of my team members and I decided to move onto a platform to manage all of our social media posts. Instead of her logging into all my accounts and doing everything manually, we said, let's find a system to automate some of this and just simplify it. Since she was going to be the one who was the primary user of this, I asked her to go do some initial research and to come back to me with 3 different options of platforms that she thought made sense to use. Ultimately, I was the decision maker, but she was the one who was making the recommendations, and then I got to understand what she liked about them and why she thought they were good, and then I got to put them through my own criteria of what I thought would work best for me, what fit our budget, etc., and then I made the decision. Now, you could imagine that we could have done that very differently. I could have said, you pick the platform, the only thing I care about is that I'm not paying more than X dollars per month, and given her more of a delegated approach where I gave her the boundary, the criteria, and then let her totally run with it. You also could imagine that I may have seen a product that I really liked, could have used one before, maybe asked some of my friends what they use in their businesses, and then just said to her, here's the one I want to use, this is why I think it's great, and taken more of a selling approach where I'd already made the decision and now I was just getting her bought into using it. None of those are right or wrong. They're all just different ways to approach that decision of which software are we going to use to manage our social media. So I hope that this will give you some new language or ways to think about and talk about who's making the decision and in what ways are people contributing to the decision to help you clarify with your team members, which ultimately is in service of giving everyone the opportunity to participate and to streamline and reduce the frictions that come when people don't understand their role and it becomes complicated in ways that are really just unnecessary. So use this model as a way to understand who's holding what authority and how are you going to work together to come to an agreement. If you found this explanation of the model helpful, I really hope that you'll hit that subscribe button. Again, I release episodes every week so you can continue to get tips and strategies and insights and learnings on how to be an effective manager. And while you're here, don't forget to check out my latest video. Thanks again for watching.